This is the first interview with Business Intelligence Manager Christopher Evans. So Chris, thanks again for meeting up with me to assist me with my thesis. Just a couple of questions I have for you. The first question is, how long have you been working in the app marketing industry?
I started almost a year ago to the day, only at App Promoters. May 1st, I believe. So 1 year.
1 year. And what got you attracted into this industry?
It was more, to be honest, it was the excitement of working for a startup and doing something sort of fast-paced. In all the interviews, I remember they used the term fast-paced over and over again, which appealed to me. And it is very much like that. At times, it's felt like Wall Street or something like that, where people are shouting across the floor, buy, sell, all of these sorts of things.
Okay, and can you just elaborate on your position within the company?
Yeah, so originally for the first 6 months, I was a account manager, which just meant that I was liaising with clients and buying and selling, like I said, on the floor, just like that. And then for the last 6 months, I transitioned to the business intelligence department. In fact, I set up the business intelligence department to handle operations and do data analyses in order to support the other account managers.
Okay, and during your time as an account manager, can you elaborate on your experience with working with Asian partners such as China, Korea, Japan?
Yeah, this is extra pertinent for me actually. I was brought in as an Asian account manager because of my Chinese and Japanese language skills. So the advert that I responded to was Asian account manager. In terms of elaborating on my experience with them, generally positive. Obviously it's different from country to country, but it was always I kind of enjoyed the thrill of waking up every morning and having clients to speak to immediately, because obviously for them it was winding down, it was the afternoon. Yeah, I generally enjoyed it, I would say.
Okay, and were there any challenges throughout the partnerships, and if so, please elaborate on them?
Yeah, of course. One of the biggest challenges is making the difference in business culture and the way that business is conducted, making that fit. So the way things have been for the last few generations is that, generally speaking, people from other cultures would have to fit to a more Western style of doing business. I feel like that's changing right now.
Yeah.
Definitely,
We have to
everyone's still speaking English, but I could see that changing quite soon, to be honest. And again, one of the reasons why I was brought in is because they wanted someone who spoke Chinese and Japanese who could not pander to those markets, but provide a certain ease of entry, let's say.
Okay, so just to go back on that, so you think that eventually it'll be us adjusting to their business culture?
I think it will be more balanced.
Okay.
English is always going to be the language of business, but even in this, I've noticed I could get more out of my Asian clients if I spoke to them in their language.
They feel more at ease with you?
They feel more at ease with me, but the trade-off with that is they also are more willing to shout at me. Whereas they might be polite with my manager at the time, Lior, because they would have to go a bit more slowly and think about what they're saying because they're doing it in English. They do it in Chinese. They'll be on WeChat and they'll just let their fingers fly. I mean,
So in their state of mind, because you understand the language, you should understand them more better. So if you don't get something the first time, they'll be more hard on you?
I don't know about that. It wasn't to do with understanding the language per se. It was more to do with when there are mess ups.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So because you speak the language, they're more hard on you. They give you everything. It's not like they're holding back.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's the same. I mean, I speak a little bit of Dutch and I could probably say some pretty mean stuff in Dutch, but if I really wanted to get expressive with just how pissed off I am, just how angry I am.
Okay.
English, obviously.
Yeah. And of your Asian partners, which country like proved to be the most challenging, and why? So of like China, Japan, Korea.
No surprise to anyone, the answer is China. The reason that they're the most challenging. Okay, so I've also done a little bit of business development because when you're at a startup, you've got to be all things to all people. In terms of business development, Japanese is the hardest to break into. It's such a closed system in that they basically keep everything between Japanese countries, between Japanese companies, because that's where the trust is. As in, they trust each other more than they trust outside business partners. And also, Japanese companies tend not to speak English.
And why is that?
That is a much longer socio-economic question about English training in Japan, and just the English level is lower.
Okay.
Plus, they're in a privileged enough position that they can dictate, oh, actually, we want you guys to speak Japanese to us. In Korea and China, they speak English still, although, as we've already alluded to, I don't know how much longer that'll stay like that.
Okay.
Koreans, but once you break into the Japanese market, they're actually very amicable and very easy to get on with and quite easy to work with. I mean, they're quite rigid, but they're upfront and straightforward, and it's relatively simple. Korean is the best of both worlds because they speak English and they have that Japanese business mentality.
Okay.
So because they speak English, it's a bit easier to break into that market. And then once you're doing business with them, they're very communicative and they're very straightforward. Chinese, they're very communicative and very straightforward. Very easy to break into the market. They're very willing, but we've run into a lot of problems with Chinese companies doing things their own way, which is to say, taking advantage of the client-supplier relationship,
Okay.
knowing that they hold all the cards and they hold all the money and therefore all the cards.
Okay.
It seems to speak to more of a my way or the highway mentality, which we haven't really seen with other partners. The way I would put that is, we see a high concentration of that in China. It's not always like that in China.
So it's obviously. It's not the whole amount of partners in China, but it does happen.
No, it's just it happens more in China than from other countries. I could name other countries as well where that stuff kind of happens. In Israeli companies, that happens a few times. And obviously there are American and Canadian and British and Dutch companies that do the same shit, do the same stuff. But you find a higher concentration in China where they seem to have a bit more freedom with litigious affairs.
Okay. So you already alluded to their culture, mainly in Asia, being the reason for affecting their business. And what is it about their culture that just affects business so much that in some ways makes it difficult in being partners with them?
Well, we worked with Chinese colleagues.
Okay.
And one of the things that came up quite often came to be a sort of, what's the word? Sort of a clashing point was that the bottom line was always money.
On the Western side, or
on
our end, or the Asian side?
On the Asian side.
Okay.
Money at all costs, which is something that didn't really fit with our working culture here.
Okay.
I found.
Okay.
It was definitely the same when I was working in these countries, that it was money at all costs. That was the number one thing. So that certainly makes it difficult because there's a difference of ideology there. Another thing that would make it difficult would be the things that I already said about breaking into the culture and whether they, how amicable they are. But then there are also a lot of things that make it a lot easier to work with them. For example, when you go into business, at least in this industry, when you go into business with a Chinese company, you can expect how they're going to take advantage of you.
Okay, so it's not like it's any hidden corners. You know what to expect, so you know.
It's unspoken. It's unspoken rules of the industry.
Okay.
If you go into business with a Chinese company, they are not. So there's a process called skimming, skimming off the top, where essentially, so in order for us to make money, in order for app promoters to make money, we need to get one. To oversimplify it, we need to get one URL link sent to us from our advertiser.
Okay.
That advertiser could either be a direct app, so it could be something like, I don't know, eToro or 9292 or whoever is trying to advertise, or it could be another agency that's representing an advertiser. It could be anything like that. But basically, if they send us one URL, we get paid X dollars, depending on what we've agreed.
Okay.
And when would that URL get sent? That URL would get sent when we have provided one user for that company.
Okay.
Quite often, not quite often, almost always, it's well known that particularly Chinese companies will not always send one URL for each user that we generate for them. For example, if we put out an advert on a website and 100 people download and start using whatever the app is, then we will maybe get 70 URLs from the Chinese advertiser.
Oh, wow.
It's just sort of it's something that I've had so many people in this industry say, quote unquote, everyone knows. Everyone knows this happens, you know. They'll send me screenshots and I'll say, but hang on, you only sent us 70, but in your screenshot I see 100, and they say, well, yeah, everyone knows this happens. That kind of thing, which, to be honest, makes it easier to work with them, because at least they're upfront and direct about how they're fucking you. Can I say that in the end?
Yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
At least they're sort of, you know, it's better than, there's no cloak and daggers. Basically.
Okay.
It's all, no, we're going to fuck you, and we're going to tell you exactly how we're going to fuck you.
Okay. And let's see. So question 7. So with all you discussed, do you think that based on their culture, it makes it harder to establish rapport with them?
No, I just think you got to meet them halfway. A lot of people say, oh, they're so difficult to work with. Imagine you're in Shenzhen, and you speak English as a second language, maybe even a third language. And yes, you've been training business, but you have Chinese university level education, which is fine, it's not amazing. And then you go into your graduate job, because let's face it, in this industry, everyone's 25.
Yeah.
You go into your graduate job and you get given a bunch of clients from America and Mexico, and you get told all sorts of stuff all day and that you've never heard of before, as in business practices that you've never come across before. You know, your whole life you've been trained by Chinese business professors who tell you this is the way you do business, and then suddenly you come into an industry and they say, no, we got to do business the way the Israelis do it, or the way the Americans do it, or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair that they should have to only adapt to us.
Yeah, it should be down the middle. We should both.
Should be down the middle. So in terms of, is it difficult to create a partnership? No. You just have to make sure that the people you're hiring understand a little bit about the Asian mindset. Not the Asian mindset, because that's a huge number of people, but the mindset for that target market, you know?
Yeah.
Or even you don't have to hire them like that, but give them on-the-job training about that.
Okay.
You know, or if you can, send them to China for a week to do a boot camp.
There you go.
Or even just here, hire a Chinese instructor. I mean, the amount of times I get better deals just because I say ni hao, or like zao an instead of good morning.
Yeah.
They just, it's lovely for them.
Lets them know that you're trying.
And you really are trying.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other people see, I know we're not only talking about China, but China is the biggest one here. They see it as like this fat cow that they can milk.
Okay.
And not as like its own creature.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. So now to Indonesia. When did you first discover the potential of the Indonesian market?
I discovered it when I joined App Promoters. I didn't realize what a big deal it was and how much people were focusing on it. I've been to Indonesia and I never would have guessed that the place that I went to 4 or 5 years ago is now the place that everyone seems to want to get their teeth into. Yeah, it was more just the more you talk in the industry, and it started on the first couple of days when I see, oh, okay, we got a deal here in Indonesia, that's niche.
Okay.
And then you see next week, oh, we got a bunch more. And then after a month, you're making $100,000 revenue from one offer in Indonesia, and you start to think, oh crap, actually this could be a huge thing. Okay. And then from there, sort of looking into it, my knowledge grew.
So in more detail, can you elaborate on the importance of App Promoters breaking into that market? Yeah,
well, it's just everyone's talking about it, saying it's the next big thing. People used to talk about the BRICS countries, and now no one mentions BRICS anymore. Brazil is no longer interesting to anyone, nor is South Africa or Russia. Now they're talking about China, India, and Indonesia. They say that China and India broke out of the BRICS, and now Indonesia has joined them. And I believe it's the third fastest growing mobile user base in the world.
Okay.
Behind China and India. Also the third fastest growing middle class in the world. They have a very progressive government right now. Jokowi is very pro-business. They're moving the capital from Jakarta to a more stable location. They're clearly thinking decades down the line.
Yeah, they're thinking long term.
Yeah, thinking really long term. And if you look at China now, sorry to bring it back to China, but the reason that China are the powerhouse they are now is because of the steps that they took in the 1980s.
Yeah.
Under, who was it, Deng Xiaoping or whomever. And it seems like that's what Indonesia is doing now.
Okay.
People have always sort of spoken, again, to mention some of the BRICS countries, about Brazil and Russia and South Africa and maybe Nigeria. They've always said, yeah, this could be the next big thing, but then they've never really moved forward.
Yeah, I found that very interesting, even when you mentioned that they were part of the Next 11 as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you look at the Next 11, not many of them have broken out of that sort of, oh, they're going to be the next big thing, I promise. Turkey, Iran, Nigeria again. Donald Trump. He heard me say Iran and he popped up. Yeah, whereas Indonesia, I mean, you only need to look at the shopping statistics. Second biggest market for, AliExpress Day, 1111. Second biggest market behind China.
Wow. That's saying something.
Yeah, it's huge.
Do you think the challenges App Promoters has encountered with their other Asian countries that they've dealt with, so China, Japan, Korea, do you think they will encounter those kind of issues with Indonesia? And would it be more or less difficult or about the same?
I think Indonesia will be more like Korea, which, as I said, was the most amicable and easy to get into of the three, because you've got a large English-speaking population.
Okay.
And people that are just ready to do business, I think.
Okay. They want to show the world what they can do.
Yeah, they really do. I was speaking to an Indonesian friend just last night, and she was proud that they're moving the capital, and they're proud that Jokowi got elected again, and proud that people are talking about Indonesia. And she works for, I don't know, some government institution. And the government institution is in charge of innovation.
Nice.
Or they held like a event fair for innovation that's happening in Indonesia.
Okay.
And she is really excited for what Indonesia can become. And also when you go to Indonesia, there's a lot of national pride, and they're also very excited for what Indonesia can become. And they're very excited that people are talking about them, and they're very excited that people want to do business with them. So for now, it's sort of like this, almost like a honeymoon phase that I'm sure will come to an end, but where Indonesian companies are very eager to get a foot in the door, to get a place on the world stage.
Yeah.
So now is the time.
Yeah,
now really is the time.
Before it becomes too saturated.
Saturated, exactly.
Okay.
Which it will.
And in your opinion, what do you think can be done for app promoters to build direct partnerships with these companies?
That's a good question.
Do you think it's more like more training, hire more Indonesian natives?
I don't think hiring Indonesian natives would be necessary because, like I said, you've got this highly anglicized middle class and upper middle class, especially the educated middle class, who do all of their education in English. And the business culture, maybe because of their Dutch heritage, I don't know, but the business culture is quite westernized already. Obviously, Indonesia is its own culture and it has its own practices and its own customs, but it is generally well adapted to the Western world already, I find.
Okay.
I think in terms of what can app promoters do to build direct partnerships? I'm not even sure, because the way that direct partnerships are built in this industry is all through email. You literally just email direct app developers and say, this is what we can do in your country. Do you want to, this is what we can do for your company. Do you want to run with us? And Indonesian companies have actually been pretty willing.
Okay.
With strict guidelines. So every campaign has to have a key performance indicator. They have very strict key performance KPIs, key performance indicators.
Okay.
So they're already very open. What can you do to build direct partnerships? Business trips and conferences in Indonesia.
I was just about to ask, do you think it's more essential that we focus on more face-to-face contact than digitally, emails, over Skype?
Always.
Yeah.
But that's got nothing to do with Indonesia.
Okay.
For me, as I know a lot of people say, oh, in Asia they value face-to-face. Everywhere they value face-to-face.
Yeah. It's just more trust.
Yeah.
You want to know who you're working with.
Everyone in the industry now knows and trusts Daniel, our business development manager.
Yeah.
Because he's at all of the conferences, putting in the FaceTime and drinking with them and having fun with them and not even doing deals with them, just making the partnerships.
Let them know that you're human.
Exactly. So it's got nothing to do with Indonesia per se. I'm sorry, that's not much of an answer to your question, but same with anywhere else. Go in there, put in the FaceTime, get to know them. But hiring Indonesian, no, I don't think you need to hire Indonesian people. We hired a Korean account manager. Didn't get that much more from the Korean companies than we would have got anyway. Again, we had Chinese colleagues who didn't get that much more as we would have.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like we're still working with a bunch of Chinese companies now and they're no longer here, so.
Yeah.
Put in FaceTime.
Given the knowledge that you have of the Indonesian market, why do you think App Promoters hasn't already stepped into that market? Like, why is it only occurring now that they're thinking about it? Why hasn't it happened like last year, for example?
To speak frankly, I think it's a misstep by the management.
Okay.
I think we should have gone already.
Okay.
I think we should have gone a long time ago.
Yeah.
However, when you look at the raw numbers of you only get paid 40 cents per install, whereas in America you get paid $3 per install, then the management here believes we should be sending people to exactly, but then not taking into account the fact that the US market is completely oversaturated right now, to the point where Google are scrambling to make retargeting software so that they can get users to install again.
Wow.
Because basically, I mean, your phone, you've got it set up the way you like it, right? You know all the apps that you need. And yes, new games will keep coming out, but games will always have the same basic functions, same basic mechanics. It's saturated. The West is just a totally saturated market. The potential in Indonesia is insane because people don't have enough phones yet.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a reason why I feel like there's something that other companies see plainly that we don't see. I saw a report from the London Stock Exchange that basically put Indonesia as #1 for their target market right now.
Okay.
Their top sort of investment tip was Indonesia. Xiaomi and Huawei and Oppo and those kind of like phone manufacturers are booming in Indonesia.
Yeah.
While Apple is still focused on America. It's because the returns aren't immediately obvious. That's why more hasn't been done with app promoters in Indonesia.
Okay.
Because it looks like pennies, but
it
get
adds
enough.
Up.
Yeah, exactly. You gather enough pennies and suddenly you're millionaires.
Exactly. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Not really.
So you're good?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again for the interview, Chris.
Yeah, no problem.
This was very, very helpful for the thesis. Thanks again.
All right.